Hello and welcome back. I'm Steve Green again, and this is going to be a video based on a request I've had from Sam to do with updating many-to-many. So the example is following on from the teacher-student one we did a week or so ago, but using FetchXML to retrieve the associated records. So we're going to look at I've put a field onto the teacher entity. So if I bring up my CRM to show you, go to my custom teacher entity, and if I open this Professor Smith, what we're looking to do, sorry it's a bit slow, is I've put a favourite subject field on the form. So I took a few clicks then. So there's this favourite subject, so we're looking to register a plugin on an update of that field, which will update all of the associated contacts. So we've got these 223 contacts, and on their form I've also put the same favourite subject, which is just a single line of text field, 100 characters. So if I go across to Visual Studio, open up my demo solution, what we'll do is create a new plugin, again following a sort of similar structure to ones we've done in the past, and we'll then do a retrieve multiple using a FetchXML statement. So you're probably quite familiar with this by now. It's my demo solution, which got a couple of Silverlight stuff from some previous videos, a plugins and workflow solution, and then the central package for the deployment with the register file. So if I right click my plugins, add new item, choose class library, we'll just call this update related end-to-end, add that. Obviously I'll add my Microsoft XRM.SDK namespace, change our access modifier, implement our iPlugin interface, right click it, implement. So obviously I can delete this not implemented exception, and then I can go back to a previous plugin and just copy sort of inner content down to the catch blocks, and then I'll delete this business logic. This is obviously the summing times logic, and obviously I'll need to change this to, it'll be an update message still, but it'll be on the FSO underscore teachers, I think it is. Let me just double check that. So expand my entities, teacher, no sorry it's singular, FSO teacher. So yeah, so on an update of a teacher record, I mean really we should do it on the create as well, so a freshly created one, but obviously a created one wouldn't have any associated contacts, so that's a bit pointless to be honest, so bad example by me. Just need our system.service model namespace for that fault exception. So now we've got this fairly standard. I've got these from a previous example of debugging these tracing statements, which we don't really need. Let me just clear a bit of this white space. Okay, so yeah, that's a pretty standard plugin at this point, with no business logic. The business logic is inside the try block, but all it's doing at the moment is instantiating the service, organization service. And I just need to also regenerate my early bound entity class, because I've added those two fields since that was generated. So I need to use my CRM SVC util to generate my early bound type. So I'll just pop it on pause and I'll come back to you in a minute. So I've generated my early bound type library, so I'll just replace this. Delete the existing one, plugins, add existing item. In my SDK bin folder I've got this demo early bound CS file, which is now the latest version that includes that additional field. So we've got the shell of our plugin. We need to obviously modify the register file again to incorporate this new plugin. So I'll take this calculate minutes, copy that, just give it a basic description. We use that for the friendly name. Just delete the step out of it. We'll recreate that in a second with the CRM Explorer. The name is, let's just copy that from the class, and at the end for the type name, replace that with 4, 4 and 12. So that's the GUID reset to zeros. So now we can deploy that to the platform. Okay, it's deployed. So if I look in my solution under my plugin assemblies, under plugins, I can now see my change related end-to-end plugin. I haven't created a step yet, so that's what we'll do next to register it against the update message. So back into Visual Studio, expand out my CRM Explorer, expand my organization, expand plugin assemblies and expand plugins, find my friendly named change related end-to-end. There are no current steps. Right click, add step. So this will be on our teacher entity as the trigger. So if I scroll down and look for teacher, select that, it will retrieve the available message types. We're going to do it on a update, so when we modify that field, the favorite subject field, it will trigger the plugin, and then obviously we'll do the business logic for that in a second. It could be pre or post operation, to be honest, because we're manipulating other records. It's not going to particularly matter, so we'll do it post operation, so it'll already have committed the update to the database. Synchronous, and we'll filter the update message on just the favorite subject field, so this plugin will only trigger when the favorite subject changes. We again don't need a pre or post image because we're not modifying or looking at the current record, we're looking at related records. So okay, that, get our message regarding the register file. We've now got the extra step for the post operation of the teacher update, etc. So I can deploy that. Okay, so now we're ready to write the business logic. So if I close the register file, I'll just show you that that has actually indeed, if I click the SDK message processing steps, we can see post teacher update step. So now we need to write the business logic. This is going to obviously be based on a FetchXML query. So we're going to be, if we start by casting our entity that we've extracted into our late bound type into an early bound teacher record. Sorry, entity dot to entity FSO teacher. And now we need to do our retrieve of our, well, sorry, we need to define our FetchXML, which will be a string. And in order to generate this, what I'm going to use is, I sometimes use the link pad, which is a free download. I think you can pay for the premium features for IntelliSense and so on, but it allows you to define link statements. There is an add-on on the internet. If you do a search for CRM 2011 link pad FetchXML, there's an add-on that you can add this extension, and it adds these couple of methods that will convert your link query into a FetchXML statement. So what we're going to do is query the contact entity join it to the middle entity, that the many-to-many entity that I showed you on a previous video that we did the count with. So we're going to link the contact entity to this entity where the contact ID equals that middle entity's contact ID, where the teacher ID equals the teacher we're going to pass in. Obviously I've just picked the GUID of that Professor Smith's record to show you. If I execute that, it generates a FetchXML statement. What I can do is, I think that should just actually create the results. So the 223 records that are related to Professor Smith, that's just showing you that what that link statement's doing. It because I'm only selecting the full name of the contact, so it's the 223 students who are related to Professor Smith, which is all the people whose name ends or contains Smith, so Smithers and so on. But obviously we want to turn that into a fetch statement, and what I'll also do is, instead of actually outputting the full name, I'll output the FSO. Let me just expand my connection. So scroll down to contact set, expand, and I should have an FSO favorite subject. May need to refresh this connection. Contact set. Not sure why we haven't got the favorite subject, but I know if I go back to my CRM, open my demo solution and expand my contact. So from the contact entity, we only wanted to select the single field we're interested in, so we can update it. So contact, fields, and then should have FSO favorite subject. Obviously it'll be the schema name that the link pad that will expect. So FSO underscore favorite subject. I can just confirm that by running it. I may need to refresh the entities. I'll just pop it on pause and do that. Okay, sorry about that. I had to refresh the schema for the link pad, so that's now recognising this FSO favorite subject. So what that's done is built a fetch statement down the bottom, which I can now copy into Visual Studio. So I can set up my string. What I will need to do is a bit of tidying up of the actual XML. So if I put a closing speech marks, entity name, attribute name, link entity, and then the filter criteria, and then the closing nodes. Just put a I'll replace these speech marks with single quotes, because it's saying them as the end of the string. So if I actually replace, sorry about this, replace that with that. Okay, so we should have, yeah, I mean I need to probably do some tidying, but you've got the gist. So there's our fetch statement, and then we can now use the retrieve multiple method and do a fetch expression. So rather than having to define a query expression or a link statement to retrieve the data, we can actually now define a new entity collection. Just call it results equals service dot retrieve multiple. Retrieve multiple, and then new fetch. I need the query namespace at the top. Using Microsoft.xrm.sdk.query, and now it should recognize the fetch expression, and then it's expecting a string, which is our fetch query from above. So that makes it quite a lot simpler than a query expression where you have to define various condition expressions and so on. Obviously you can build reasonably complex ones with advanced find. I don't think you can reference many-to-many entities though, so you would have to actually manipulate it outside of the advanced find. But now we've done this retrieve multiple of those. Sorry, one thing I did forget. I've hard coded a value, so we can do an escape character there and take our early bound teacher ID. And doesn't like something about that. Yeah, it's not like in my, if I try and do a speech marks, it doesn't like that being part of the constant. So you just make that back to a character stream. What I'll do is I'll put something between these closing brace. I'll just put ZZZ and I'll replace that afterwards. So string, let's see, fetch query dot replace. That expects the old value. So if I take the fetch query, sorry, the ZZZ, and replace it with teacher.id, and I'll pass that into back into fetch query. Okay, so that should now replace where I've got ZZZ, some invalid arguments. I need to use the toString to cast the GUID to a string. So now that will replace where I've put ZZZZ within the curly braces where I'm looking for the teacher ID. It's going to replace it with the ID of the early bound type. So now we should have a collection of associated contacts, and we're just retrieving the FSO favourite subject. So we need to iterate through each one. So I'll just say student in results.entities. So this is going to iterate through each of the contacts that have been retrieved. And if we cast, they're already going to be, we do need to cast them to a contact type. So contact early bound student equals student dot to entity contact. And now this early bound student record, we can set the favourite subject to match the teacher's because he's a bit strict and whatever he likes, you like. So equals teacher dot favourite subject. And then we need to, because it's a standard entity, not a link provider. We need to actually update each one in turn as we go. And hopefully this isn't going to time out because there's over 200 of them. So it's not really ideal, again, I've mentioned before, doing bulk operations within a plugin because of the 2-minute timeout. I mean, hopefully 223 will get processed within the time, but it was no guarantee. So that should be our logic. We're triggering on the teacher records, update of favourite subject. We cast it to an early bound type. We've set up a fetch query from a link statement, which is going to retrieve contacts that are linked to this middle entity, the many-to-many entity, where, well, via the contact ID on the contact entity to the middle entity, where, and there's a filter, where the teacher ID equals the teacher GUID that we're passing in, and then we iterate through each one, changing the student's favourite subject to the teacher's favourite subject. So I'll just deploy that. Oops, sorry, I've missed a closing brace. Let me just deploy that again. Okay, so that's now deployed. So now if we go across to CRM, open our Professor Smith, and obviously we can see we haven't put a favourite subject yet, and we've got our associated contact view. What I will do is just put the favourite subject field onto that contact associated view. So go to settings, my solution, contact views, contact associated view, open that, add column, find my favourite subject column, or field rather, stick that on there, make it a bit wider, so 150, maybe make the full name a little bit thinner. So save and close, publish my customizations, so they're published, so I can minimize my solution, go back to my custom teacher entity, open Professor Smith again, click on contacts. So now we can see there's 223 contacts with no favourite subject. Professor Smith has decided everybody should like physics. So when we save, this will now trigger our plugin, which should do the fetch retrieval into an entity collection, and then iterate through each one, changing the favourite subject to that, same as the teachers, and do an update. So if I click save, it's going to be a bit of a delay as it processes all 220. That wasn't too bad. So if I click on contacts, we can now see that everybody loves physics because Professor Smith says they should. If I go back and change it to maths and save again, that's not took too long. Now all of his students like maths as their favourite subject. So I'm kind of hoping that was what Sam and that were looking for. I say how you build this fetch statement is entirely up to you. Obviously I was using this link pads and converting it from a link statement, but if you've got better methods or preferred methods, then obviously feel free to use those, but that's how you use a fetch expression within the retrieve multiple method. But thanks again for watching. I just wanted to quickly show you that I've started looking to introduce an e-commerce site called www.crmdeveloper.co.uk. Offer sort of a couple of recommendations from a couple of my subscribers. Feel free to have a look. Obviously there's nothing available to buy as of yet. I'm still in the process of preparing all the material and the source code and solutions, but have a look through the shop, give me any feedback you like, whether you think the prices are too high, if the content's insufficient, and so on. And yeah, and obviously there's also a forum I've set up, which is in its very early infancy stages at the moment, which is forum.crmdeveloper.co.uk. Again, feel free to register and check that out, and any recommendations for subjects, for areas of the forum and so on, will be gladly received. So again, at the moment I've just got a few sections that I've started to build over the last day or so, which, I mean, I've only spent an hour or so on the forum, the forum. So yeah, but anyway, thanks for listening, and I'll look forward to some questions and some feedback.